Rick, I love you, Val Glasser said, but we are not doing the Santa River cruise this year. It was a random place for the comment. They were clearing the dinner table, splitting a glass of wine as the kids rambled off to homework or video games. But there was nothing random about the time, December 14th, in the dead middle of the holiday planning season. The Roke District's antique light posts were trimmed with holly. The Franklin Federals were 12 games into their season, the players wearing Santa hats in 30-second charity spots. Families from the western tip of Franklin Falls to the eastern banks of Cornville Lake were deep in the throes of negotiation. Rick answered his wife's proclamation with an easy grin. My parents are just happy to be seeing us at Christmas, he said. We can skip the river cruise. Val turned her face sideways, skeptical. Rick continued, Mom likes the river cruise, but it's not some strict requirement. You're sure about that? Val asked, gesturing with a hand that happened to be holding a dirty butter knife. Because 2 years ago it was a crisis when your sister suggested skipping it to beat traffic home. And 4 years ago, I got major stink-eye for begging out with a 103-degree fever. In odd years, they spent Christmas in Atlanta with Val's family. Oh, was it really 103? Rick teased. Val brandished the butter knife. Nah, it's fine, he said. They'll be a little disappointed. It's close to their place. Dad always prints out that group picture with Santa and hangs it. And, Mom raves about how the lights reflect across the water. Val noted that despite her husband saying they didn't have to go, he just made 3 arguments to the contrary. It's miserable, Val countered. I'd love to know how many cases of frostbite Franklin General handles as a direct result of waiting in that line. Whoever decided to make that a tradition, riding on a half-frozen body of water with Santa and the elves? Santa travels by sleigh. Everybody knows that. Rick shrugged. The Shawnee River is important to the city. The founders tried to weave it in wherever they could. Val grimaced. The founders. She had no use for those guys. Look, Rick said, we can skip it. I'll tell my parents we're skipping. She wasn't sure if this offer was genuine or if her husband was fishing for a, no, don't do that, we'll play it by ear, de-escalation. If he was, too bad for him. Blame me, she said. Just say I refuse. It'll fit my established role as heartless, domineering wife. They paused to coordinate dishwasher loading. Rick stood back so she could stick the silverware into its caddy, then wedged glasses into the top rack from between his knuckles. Nobody thinks you're heartless or domineering, he said. It should be fine. Should? Val's hands were on her hips. Now you're saying should? Are you not on board? I'm on board. Rick slinked his head side to side. I haven't talked to my sister about it. I don't know how her kids feel about the river cruise. How they feel? They're 5. They'll feel frozen. Last time they were bawling and fighting and crabby the whole time. And who wouldn't be after 3 hours waiting in that line? Rick closed the dishwasher door. It took an extra nudge. That skillet handle was always sticking out too far. Then it won't be a problem, he said. I'm sure Kate will agree and will tell my parents, and that'll be that. No river cruise. He took a sip of wine, then handed the glass breezily to Val. He was acting like this was as simple as plugging in a string of Christmas lights, but Val knew there was nothing simple about it. If she stuck to her guns, feelings would be hurt. Outrageous conclusions would be drawn about her, about their marriage, about the sort of upbringing the Glasser grandchildren were receiving. It was going to be a slog. They were going to plug in that string of Christmas lights, and only half the little jerks were going to perk up. And then what, Rick? Then what? The next day, Val called her sister-in-law, Kate. Rick and I were thinking no on the river cruise this year, she said. Is that cool, or do you think the twins care about it? The forecast looks pretty icky. Kate spluttered, clearly not ready for the question. Naturally, she was swamped. Her boy-girl twins, Kendra and Colton, were in their last year of pre-K and home with her in the afternoon. Val said, not a big deal. I know Peg was Kate and Rick's mother, is kind of invested in that tradition, unhealthily invested, perhaps, and I didn't want to just spring it on everybody that we're bailing at the last second. Oh, okay, Kate said. The twins won't care, I don't think. They were 3 last time, and Colton's never been big on Santa laps. Good, great, Val said. She felt slightly evil saying these next words, but reassured herself with the knowledge that she was acting in the best interests of her children's health and circulation. So, she began, if you do happen to speak with your mom about Christmas, Val winced and tapped her laptop case. She was at work. And she does happen to mention the Santa River cruise, maybe you could mention your crew isn't keen on the idea? Over the line came a crash, with that characteristically harsh crinkle of glass breaking. Forget it, Val said. Sorry to bug you. I get all catty and weird when Christmas comes around. Kate laughed, a tired, relieved sound. Join the club. Val asked how her new husband, Todd, was feeling about the get-together. He says you and him might not get Christmas. Kate's voice went in and out like she was bent over sweeping. F-Corp's really pushing to finish the year strong, huh? Val and Todd both worked for F-Corp. They were in different divisions, Val marketing and him business development, but their functions were close enough that the rest of the family just lumped them together as corporatish employees of Franklin's largest company. Nose to the grindstone, Val answered just to say something. The truth was Val's workload had been pretty typical. She actually had a facial and lemongrass body polish scheduled for the afternoon. If there was some larger F-Corp push, marketing hadn't been affected. Was Todd really swamped, Val wondered, or just saying he was swamped so he could spend longer hours away from home? As the call ended, Val felt lousy for having the suspicion. Of course, it wasn't her fault. Nobody trusts second husbands. You couldn't help asking what exactly had compelled Todd to join himself and his own teenage son to Kate and her 2 children, to move backwards in the concentric circles of parenting hell into the muck of whining and phonics. Val's sunnier side cried, "Love! He did it for love!" And it was true that she would have married Rick with 2 kids, 4 dogs, and a giraffe if she'd had to. He would have done likewise. Her sourpuss side, though, was rolling its eyes. At home, Val tracked down Wyatt playing Hi-Fi in the basement. "What's the word, Wyatt?" she said. He punched buttons for a full 7 seconds before saying, "Hey." Meaningful communication while her oldest was playing video games would be difficult, but she didn't feel within her rights pulling his plug for the sake of nasty subterfuge. "So," Val said, "Christmas, presents, friends and family." On screen, Wyatt finished defeating some monster. "Yes, I plan to participate." Val felt a rush of warmth that he and Rick had produced such an interesting person. "I'm trying to head off another 3-hour wait in sub-zero temps for the Santa River cruise," she said, "and I need accomplices." He squinted. "That's the boat ride thing? With all the toy trains?" She chose to ignore the excited tinge in his voice. He was just a kid after all. Kids remember the good stuff and forget the bad. "That's the one," Val said, "though I hear rumors they're de-emphasizing trains. Anyway, I need the young crowd on the sidelines. It's no good if the tykes are all squealing to go see Santa on Christmas Day." "I don't do much squealing, Mom." "Right, it's not you I'm worried about. The twins may or may not be receiving this awesome, amazing board game called Hide a Hippo. It's my hope this game will be so engrossing that all the kids will insist on staying indoors and playing through dinner and missing the 5 o'clock river cruise cutoff." Wyatt was nodding as his character crossed a field of swaying digital grass. Now the character squatted by a tree, surrounded by glittery mushrooms. Val said, "Can I count on your being engrossed?" He kept nodding. "I can do engrossed. What's it called, Hideaway?" "Hide a Hippo." "Oh." He straightened up in confusion, then shrugged. "Weird, but okay." The 20-hour Glasser family holiday extravaganza began with Christmas Eve dinner at the Roundhouse, the last boring restaurant left in the Roke district. With the grandparents on the way, they were walking from their house. The 2 families met in front of the hostess stand, a wooden podium decorated with a ship captain's wheel. As Todd hugged Val, he whispered in her ear, 4 blocks over and we could be eating sushi." Though she'd had the same thought herself, Val gave no answer. She didn't feel ready to form an in-law snark partnership with Todd just yet. Dinner was fun. Once Grandma Peg and Grandpa Bob arrived, the group was seated immediately, and the giant kids' menus with crayons and goofy mazes occupied the littles, Kendra and Colton, plus Val's kindergartner Reed. The server brought bread, wire baskets overflowing with buttery carbs. The adults leaned back in button-upholstered chairs with their drinks, feeling the heaviest lifting of the holiday season was over. Presents, prep, travel. Even Lance, Todd's 14-year-old son, who often drifts above the kids' scene texting on his phone, was engaged, telling Wyatt and Ava, the Glassers' middle child, some story that had them both bugging their eyes and forgetting their blue raspberry slushies. What sort of teen juiciness was he dishing, Val wondered. Romance stuff? It had better not be romance stuff. as a gargantuan plate of loaded nachos got divvied up. Rick and Kate were laughing uproariously at their parents' tales of Christmases past. Rick had been stressed lately opening Tramp Bar, a combination brew pub trampoline park he was launching in February, and it warmed Val's heart to see him enjoying the company of his sister and grandparents. It was almost enough to make her forget her mission. Almost. "Whew, did people see the forecast for tomorrow?" Val said, shivering her elbows. "It's going to be even colder than today. Should be a great day for hanging out by Grandpa Bob's cozy fire." Grandma Peg took her napkin from her lap and refolded it. Rick's and Kate's smiles turned into half-smiles. "That's right," Val thought, gritting her teeth. "The end zones are chalked. The refs have entered the stadium. Buckle your chin straps." It would take nerve to beat Peg. Peg was organized, disciplined. Peg was relentless. If you let yourself get softened up by the starchy slacks and warm green eyes, she'd eat your heart. 2 years ago, Peg had disapproved of their big-ticket gift for Wyatt, a kid-safe oven. He'd taken an interest in baking after his amazing second-grade teacher, Miss Gutierrez, had done a unit on why breads and cakes rise. Val had wanted to capitalize on the spark. A week before Christmas, Rick had said, "I mentioned Wyatt's present to Mom. She didn't love the idea. Strange. I don't know why." Val knew why. She knew exactly why. Rick's parents had never fully embraced the idea of Rick as only a stay-at-home dad. In their black-and-white worldview, Wyatt getting an oven for Christmas was phase one in his emasculation. All Vic said to Rick at the time was, "Yeah, strange," because the whole topic was loaded, even in their own relationship. Val didn't think Rick was wild about the oven gift himself. That Christmas Eve, Val would have sworn Grandma Peg made a special effort to draw Ava into her pie-making operation after dinner. Ava, who'd been heavy into Hot Wheels at the time and thought dough looked like snot. That night in bed, Rick insisted, "That's just Mom's default. I don't think she has some grand plan to girlify Ava or make Wyatt and Reed into manly men." Then he flexed and did a He-Man scowl, which cracked Val up. She dropped it. Christmas morning was busy, with Colton up all night and Kate flying solo then, and Bob in a walking boot, and sharing a virtual impossibility between kids who were 3, 4, and 6 at the time. Val had just done a turn triaging fights and retired to the kitchen to breathe and take a quiet moment, when a confusion began in the living room. "What's this?" came Ava's voice. Val arrived at the room's threshold to see Peg, sitting among torn wrapping paper, reading the packaging the oven had come in. "It's for cooking yummy things," Peg explained, patting the tummy of her snowman sweater. "See the pretty girls in the picture? You could have your friends over and make—" "No," Val interrupted. "Read the tag." She hustled over and hunted around the tree skirt and found the tag 6 inches from Peg, who'd been distributing presents. Val read, "For Wyatt, from Mom and Dad. Now you can make Mrs. Gutierrez's chocolate muffins for all of us." Peg wiped her glasses frames with her sweater. "Oh, dear. I suppose my eyes aren't what they used to be." The infuriating thing was that her trick worked. When the present got reassigned to its rightful recipient, Wyatt accepted sheepishly. At home, he only tried it once after Val made him. His interest in baking never developed. Months later, Rick would say, "That's how it goes with presents, right? They're hit or miss. That My First Science kit didn't turn him into a chemist either." But Val knew, even if she couldn't prove it without looking like a petty lunatic, that Peg had helped that miss along. This year, in the early going, there were no such shenanigans. Their roundhouse service split the bill in thirds, which hurt nobody's feelings. Val's and Rick's bar bill balanced out Todd's surf and turf entree, and Grandpa Bob and Grandma Peg were always happy to subsidize. They volunteered to walk the kids back to their place while the parents moved the cars. As Val lost sight of them around the corner, Kate's twins were skipping hand-in-hand with Reed while Lance continued to beguile the older Glasser children, the 3 of them hunched together with daring grins. If he's talking about hickeys and slipping fingers into the back pockets of jeans, Val thought darkly. The grandparents' decorating was impeccable. Blinking lights lined their gutters and spiraled up the oaks and maples. Red berries peeked out from the frost-tipped wreath. Inside, gold bulbs shimmered beside felt picture-frame ornaments from Rick's and Kate's elementary school days. The kids, after the obligatory chasing of poor Mr. Whiskers, got 40 minutes of TV. Then Rick led everybody out to the yard for a theatrical sprinkling of reindeer food. Peg made a platter of milk and cookies to leave for Santa. Then teeth were brushed, pajamas were unpacked and pulled on. Rick read the night before Christmas for the bedtime story, but then had to read another when his and Val's kids whined about its lameness. Luckily, they'd packed Murray Claus, the story of the deli owner who steps in for Santa at the last second. The whole crew went to bed giggling and excited for the morning. The adults reconvened downstairs around a bottle of Grandpa Bob's best port. Todd said, "Nice job on the reindeer food, Rick. You ought to make a Pinterest page." Rick smirked at his brother-in-law's quip. "I'll shoot you the link. I know you're always working on your pinboard." Next, Todd turned to Grandma Peg. "And those snickerdoodles, man. I think I'll sneak down around midnight, see if I can beat El Chubbo to the punch. Anyone care to meet up?" Saying this, he looked straight at Val. What the hell, she thought. That couldn't possibly be innuendo, could it? Val had been picking up a minor vibe from him, but she chalked it up to them both being outsiders. A chummy, what have we gotten ourselves into with this family type of thing. Peg tisked a finger at him. "Better not wait too long. While I was getting Mr. Whisker's food out, I think I saw a sleigh rail glinting in the moonlight." Val reached for the port. "I'm going to drink until I see one, too." Now Grandpa Bob, who's an awful actor even when he's sober, pretended to say offhandedly, "I see Dan bumped up the high temperature for tomorrow. Now they think it'll hit 16. We might make it into the upper teens." Dan was the Channel 6 weatherman. Rick's parents called all the Franklin meteorologists by their first name. They liked Dan best, even though his ties were showy and he tended to exaggerate storms. The comment was a clear segue onto the Santa River cruise, and Bob's involvement here was dangerous, like Granny moving her rook out from behind the wall of pawns. Still, Val took a pass. Maybe it was the port. Maybe it was the fact that the cousins had all gotten along, that Rick was relaxed and in fine form tonight, that the holiday just seemed easier this year. The kids another year older, Kate matched up with Todd instead of single and swimming against the tide. For a fleeting moment, Val even wondered if it was worth keeping up her campaign against the river cruise. The river cruise was idiotic, sure, but so what? The kids could stand to toughen up. Last week they'd complained that her car was too cold. It didn't have remote start like her friends' parents' cars, and Val refused to raise those kids. Grandma Peg had been retired for a decade. She played mahjong at the community center and was on the waiting list to volunteer at the Vorsheim. The Santa River cruise was one of her few joys, and how many more Christmases, healthy, whole Christmases, did the family have left together? Then her mother-in-law said, "Speaking of the news, I see that lawyer's running ads on Channel 6. Fred Fights. Have you seen those Fred Fights commercials?" Val chuckled. She couldn't help it. "I have. Local news is great for finding people who are looking to sue." Grandma Peg said, "People who go out to brew pubs watch local news." "And parents," Grandpa Bob said. "Parents with kids who like to jump. If people don't even know a place exists, how can they go?" They were talking, of course, about Tramp Bar. Rick's parents naturally wanted the brew pub trampoline park to succeed. It was their baby's baby, after all, and they believed no expense should be shared on its behalf. Never mind the brutal odds a startup restaurant faced, or the money he and Val had already shelled out on the lease, on wages, on promotions that actually made sense, like targeted Facebook ads and local print media. Rick and Val had hashed out a detailed budget for Tramp Bar over the course of months, years even. The promotional expenses they'd agreed upon were generous, but whenever Rick talked to his parents, all he heard was critique. "Shouldn't you be running TV ads? You know what could really bring people in? Doing something with the Franklin Federals. Federals fans love microbrews." In their eyes, Tramp Bar was Rick's ticket out of the kitchen and playdate crowd and into the world of high finance. Now Val said, "Rick and I looked at TV spots. They might make sense down the road, but for now, given our audience and reach objectives, it's just not cost effective." Bob and Peg sat back from the table, chastened. Val had pulled rank here, obnoxiously tossing off her 10-cent marketing terms. This would shut down the topic for now, but Val knew the next time she and Rick discussed the promo budget for Tramp Bar, Rick's father's voice would be there, lurking in the back of his head. If people don't even know a place exists, how can they go? Val chuckled again, shaking her head that she'd been so easily lulled into lowering her guard. Because here, in this very exchange, was why the Santa River cruise mattered. If you gave an inch, these people would take a mile. Today they wanted river cruise and ads on the local newscast. Next week it would be billboards and preemptive gender conversion therapy for Wyatt. You had to stand your ground, Val knew. You had to, or they'd bury you. Christmas morning clanged and wheezed along, producing joys and pinch fights and 2 trash bags full of discarded bows and wrapping paper. Rick made his signature snowflake-shaped pancakes while Kate cut fruit and rinsed dishes, letting their parents relax and enjoy the kids. Val managed the opening with a dictator's efficiency. If one of hers complained about a toy, she snatched it from their greedy hands and promised, "We'll ship it all back to the elves if you can't be gracious." And they'd clam right up because she'd done it before. Those stilt walkers last year had gone away to the attic and not returned until mid-January. By and large, grace did prevail today. The twins danced a jig at getting walkie-talkies from their grandparents and murmured appreciatively at Val's hide-a-hippo game. Ava didn't say one word about Kendra taking over her remote-controlled doll jeep. Val felt pleased by her kids' behavior. There were a couple sour threads. Todd was some sort of literacy Nazi, prompting the twins to read everything in sight: cards, tags, instructions. Reed watched them, his face screwed up with angst. So far in kindergarten, he wasn't knocking it out of the park with his reading. Val intervened. "Let's see if Uncle Todd can tell us how our new mega juicer works." She handed him the instruction manual, folded open to the Mandarin Chinese page. Everyone got a laugh out of his bewildered expression. Later, Kate told Val, as they were straightening the upstairs bathroom, "I'm sorry about Todd. We've talked about letting the kids learn at their own pace. I don't know why he gets like that." Val wrenched 3 Disney toothbrushes and handed her sister-in-law the 2 she didn't recognize. "Ah, no sweat," she said. "Reed could use some academic motivation anyway. We were that way with Wyatt. By number 3, you're just content to send them to school counting to 10 and pooping where they're told." Footsteps sounded on the stairs, and a moment later Rick poked his head in. Seeing his wife and sister smiling, he smiled too. Throughout the day, Val had nice conversations with Kate about the kids, coaxing them to eat non-pasta foods, managing their friends' groups, which both agreed was futile but irresistible. Throughout the day, Val had nice conversations with Kate about the kids, coaxing them to eat non-pasta foods, managing their friend groups, which both agreed was futile but irresistible. With Todd about F-Corp, vending machine options, and that annoying new HR policy. Not soul-enriching stuff, but pleasant, civil. None of the kids melted down, even after gorging on stocking candy. Val led the willing grown-ups in a single mimosa, which bathed this day's successes in a warm, slightly fuzzy red-and-green tinge. Even Mr. Whiskers emerged from wherever he'd been hiding to sprawl out in the bay window, kinking around on his back in the afternoon sun. Val called her dad and found him in good spirits. He was having dinner at Val's sister's later. They remembered Mom and talked of how she would have loved crafting ornaments with the kids. She'd gotten sick when the oldest of the grandchildren was just 2. Of course it hurt, but Val took heart from Dad's vigor. He said he was laying off Brittany's cheesecake tonight so he'd be, quote, quick as a cat for the tennis club's New Year's tournament. The call ended with both saying they looked forward to next Christmas in Atlanta. There was so damn much holiday cheer that Val Glasser didn't even see it happen. Around 2:30, she became aware of sounds from the foyer. Gore-Tex rustling, a boot zipping, then Grandma Peg's voice in an undertone. "I know Santa's tired, but he will be there, I promise. And the elves will be there, and the trains." Val peered around the corner. Kendra was struggling to get her pinky and ring fingers into the right parts of her glove, but she was also listening to Peg, rapt. Val raced to the living room for hide-a-hippo. It was too late for a direct counterstrike, for raising the weather or sniffles issue again. Distraction was her best hope. "Hey, we haven't tried the hippo game yet," she called. "It looked cool. I thought there was hippo candy if you landed on certain squares." Wyatt smirked, watching her rifle through game markers and cards. Val saw Reed drifting toward the foyer. "Reed," she tried, "we always said hippopotamus was your spirit animal. Go see if your cousins want to play hide-a-hippo." But her youngest child was already in Grandma Peg's orbit, sucked in by descriptions of the magnificent toy trains chugging around the deck of Santa's riverboat. Val was a dervish, ripping apart plastic overwrap, devouring the instruction booklet. Yikes, the setup section was 3 pages long. There were teams and mystery cards and vitality points for the hippos and the players. Kendra and Colton were in snow pants. Reed was turning his Batman stocking cap around in his hand. He wouldn't wear it unless the bat symbol was facing forward. Rick stepped from the kitchen now, looking handsome in an apron and flannel shirt. He caught Val's eye, then saw the situation in the foyer. Mom, come on, he said. I thought we were taking a pass on the river cruise this year. Grandma Peg was squatting, spreading one of Reed's mittens open for him. She looked up with an expression of perfect innocence and aggrievement as the littles toddled around her in their bulky gear. Reed said, Are there really 8 different trains? He was stepping excitedly in place. Mom, did you know Santa has 8 different trains on his boat? Val plastered a smile on her face and tossed the hide hippo instructions back over her shoulder. Maniacal cheer, Val knew, was the only proper response when your mother-in-law checkmates you on Christmas Day. After a detour for a swig of vodka straight from the bottle, she wrapped her scarf so tight around her own neck that her brain momentarily lost airflow. Reed was tugging her coat, still keyed up about trains. Yes, I heard 8 trains, Val finally said. He's Santa Claus, kiddo. If he wants trains, who's going to stop him? She was doing up buttons, rewrapping her scarf. Right? Who would deny Santa? Who the... Val, Rick cut in and took her aside. He placed his hands on the outsides of her shoulders. We don't have to go. I can stop this, okay? I'll stop this. Just give me... No, Val said. It's fine. Really. She pointed to the front door. Onward. At the porch, the question arose of whether to walk or Uber the 12 blocks to the river. Val whipped out her phone. Uber, she said. Non-negotiable. They needed 3 cars. Rick rode ahead to save their spot in line with his mother, Reed, and the twins. Kate and Grandpa Bob took Ava, who'd been bonding with her aunt over dance, leaving Val to ride with Todd and the older boys, Lance and Wyatt. The driver looked around a heap of takeout food in his passenger seat. River cruise, yeah? You're my 10th this hour. Val didn't even want to imagine the line, snaking along the frigid banks of the Shawnee. They had to sit 4 across, Val's left thigh pressed into the door handle, her right into her brother-in-law, who smelled like some department store's men's accessories section. Well, she got her way, he said. Got her river cruise. Val exhaled at length. She deserves her own superhero franchise. On the other side of Todd, Lance and Wyatt were talking. The driver was blaring Christmas music. I simply must go. Baby, it's cold outside. And Val couldn't make out their conversation at first. Then she caught an alarming phrase. Tongue's the key. When you use your tongue, dude, they're helpless. Val felt hot spikes of outrage in her gut. Wyatt said something she didn't hear. Then Lance continued, for real, but I guess you know. Val shot forward across Todd's lap. I guess you know? No, her sweet 4th grader most certainly did not know whatever ugly, wrong-headed advice this peach fuzz Romeo was pushing. So just FYI, Val said, this Uber ride is strictly PG. The romance talk needs to stay in passing period. Got it? Lance blushed and flattened his back against the vinyl seat back. Wyatt said, we're talking about high fight, Mom. What are you, spying? Now it was Val's turn to blush. She inched out of Todd's space. High fight, she repeated. The video game. Right. Carry on, then. Todd chuckled at her. The tongue of Lazarus. Those programmers, I tell you, bunch of repressed geeks. Val barely registered this, still reeling from the fear that her oldest child knew tongue tricks he shouldn't. Wyatt had never confided in her or Rick about girls. Girls he liked, girls who liked him. She knew that world was coming. She just didn't want it to come now, or any time before he turned 25, if at all possible. Val was so distracted she didn't notice, for several seconds, a hand resting on top of her knee. Todd's hand. Her eyes snapped to his. The look she found there on his slick, wide-jawed face was flat, non-committal. He wasn't moving his hand. Seriously, he said, you're that stupid. He withdrew his hand nonchalantly now and put a crimp in his brow, like they just had a mix-up at the grocery store over whose shopping cart was whose. Val pressed her forehead against the window. She knew she couldn't tell Kate about this, that her new husband was sleaze. Maybe he was only situational sleaze. Maybe he was a good parent and provider, and they'd wrenched some decent years from the marriage, like the open-box special TV that looks washed out when you get it home, but the thing's too frickin' big to do anything other than suffer through. This okay? The driver asked, pulling over at 6th and Bucknell, 5 blocks from the river cruise launch. Val was about to ask if they could get closer, then saw the line. Space Mountain times 4. Not okay, she said, fishing out her phone to complete the transaction, but yes, please, you can drop us here. They reunited with the others, hunched away from the river, shuffling forward one sidewalk panel at a time as cart vendors peddled hot chocolate. Rick pulled Val close to his chest. Reed was passing a pair of hand warmers back and forth with the twins, pretending they were lava. The wind was diabolical, swooping from one group to the next, howling, lashing. Val's wool hat was nothing against its sound and force. The kids stepped out of line to glimpse ahead at the riverboat. "I saw Rudolph!" Reed cried. "He's out there swimming in the water." It was true. 9 reindeer were being dragged behind the paddle wheel. The lead one's nose was shining red. Val bulged her eyes to Reed and nodded that she'd seen, then asked her husband, "Why are the reindeer behind the boat? Don't they pull the sleigh?" Rick screwed up his face. "You can't compare flying to swimming. Totally different." He went to elbow him in the ribs, but he stopped her with a fresh embrace. The wind seemed to pause. Val wondered if Dad had left for Brittany's house yet. Brittany would make him take his shoes off, of course, which Val's brothers would tease her mercilessly about. At some point there would be a knockdown, drag-out fight about money, with Scotty counting up how many presents Brittany had bought and throwing the number in her face. Wait, Val thought, was Scotty still in jail? After 3 bone-chilling hours, 2 potty emergencies, and half a dozen hot chocolate runs, the Greater Glasser family had reached the heated gangplank of Santa's riverboat. "And we made it," Rick said, holding the door open. The littles hopped through like human pogo sticks. Val, moving into the warm canvas tunnel, felt every muscle in her face unclench. Santa awaited them behind a red velvet rope. "Ho, ho, ho," he roared, only a little hoarse. "Now remind me," tapping his whiskered chin, "did you boys and girls get presents from me or a lump of coal?" "Presents, presents," every kid in line shouted. In another moment they were on the riverboat, surrounded by animatronic elves and 20-foot Christmas trees and, yes, track upon track upon track of toy trains. Holographs of Alvin, Simon, and Theodore belted out, "Please Christmas, don't be late." Reed, after whispering with the twins, passed his hand through Alvin and jerked it back. Then all 3 examined the hand to see if it had changed. The boat smelled like cotton candy and brine. Wyatt and Ava were bored after 2 minutes. Rick gave them his phone and they snapped selfies inside the giant nutcracker's mouth. Grandpa Bob and Grandma Peg walked slowly at the back of the group, nudging each other, pointing out features that were new this year. Val took it all in with a crooked grin. Kate sidled up to her. "I'm sorry, you didn't want to do this, I know." "Nah," Val said, waving her off. "I was naive. Next time I'll buy non-refundable tickets to A Christmas Carol." They laughed together, an easy, tired laugh. 10 minutes later, a bell tinkled, indicating their time on the riverboat was up. Due to high winds, the boat had stayed tied up at shore. The Glassers walked back up the gangplank, keeping to one side so the next group could make its way in. Back at street level, Grandma Peg's smile hardly fit on her lips. "Did you see Reed's face when that snowman popped out of the barrel?" "I thought it was empty," Reed cried, knocking his own hat sideways. "I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it wasn't empty." Grandma Peg fixed his hat and, impossibly, smiled even wider. Val, summoning rides with the phone in her left hand, felt Rick squeezing her right. She squeezed back and had the oddly satisfying thought that in 365 short days, they'd be in Atlanta, and it would be his turn.